Hi, friends. Welcome to today's podcast. Welcome, one and all, especially my fellow book lovers, because if you clicked on this today, it's probably because you enjoy reading. I doubt a non reader would be apt to click this, but maybe you are a person who once enjoyed reading, used to enjoy reading, and has been out of it for a little bit, been out of the game. And that's totally fine. That's totally okay. I commiserate with you. And I think that, some people hate the word seasons, but there are seasons where it's like we cannot fathom doing another thing. And then there's seasons where we're like, wow, I can't fathom not reading. And me personally, I was a huge reader. And then I did not barely read for probably like 1 to 2 years in there. In I think what it was like about when I had two kids. And I think that tipped me into non reading. And now recently have been like back into it. I mentioned when we were talking about the goals episodes, if you were around for that, that I had set the goal of reading 23 books for 2023. And I just like totally stopped keeping track because it really became more of like, all right, Brett, you need to do some other things besides finish up this book. So I compiled a little list for you today. Again, wherever you're at, if you're devouring books left and right, if you're thinking, oh, maybe I'll get back into reading, this is a Healthy Catholic Moms podcast. So um, I picked books for this list that I think will help you in one of those departments, like becoming the healthiest version of yourself, the books that will help you in your motherhood, because they helped me. Now, I think books are a very personal thing where two people can read the same book and it hits you totally differently. Or you read the same book 5 years ago and then present day and it hits you totally differently. I think the scriptures are the same way. I'll read a passage and be like, wow, I've literally never thought of this. And I've read this hundreds of times. And I feel like that with books. There have been some books that I thought were absolutely earth shattering, life changing. And then I go back and read them and they just don't hit the same. You're like, wow, this hits different like 5 years later, 10 years later, whatever. Because a lot of times I think it's just what you need to hear right then. I have talked about books a lot on this podcast because I do think it's a great way to continue growing to I just find it helpful to have something. Maybe I don't think other people always think it's interesting, but I'd say interesting to talk about even with my husband and close friends, things like that. Especially for those of us who are stay-at-home moms, but or just are, working moms, and then you're at work and then you're home with your kids, and maybe like you work in a cubicle too. So it's like, or those of you who work from home where you're not really talking to other people and then you're with your kids the other time, and kids are great and all of that, but a lot of times, like for me, my oldest is 6, I'm not getting the most stimulating thoughts, conversations, etc. So um it's a good way to make sure I'm putting some new perspectives in there into my brain. I mean, some new perspectives. I'm pondering different things. I'm taking it in. I'm hopefully growing a little bit, learning new things. So I'm not going to sit here and pontificate on the great things of reading. You probably did click on this episode because you agreed. But um, I just wanted to say that I have talked about books a lot on here before, and I don't think I've shared any of these titles. And it's just a funny little number of 8 that I picked today because I fully intended on doing 10. And I sat here racking my brain, like, I know, but I've said that one before. Oh, but this. And I've stuck to, I think everything is nonfiction. So I did read some good fiction books this year. I did join a book club for the first time, which I was super pumped about, to hopefully start reading more of a variety of books. Oh, shoot. As I'm talking, I feel like there's a biography I forgot to write in here because I did read some really good biographies this year and I don't have any biographies on the list. But maybe I'll put them in the show notes if I remember as a bonus or send it out in an email as a bonus. But that's why we've got 8 was I didn't want to have to trim any off and make it 5. And it was not quite 10. So number 1 is the book Forever Strong by Dr. Gabrielle Lyon. I've talked about her a lot on this podcast. She has a podcast that I listen to, not religiously. I don't listen to every single episode, but I have listened to. I have followed her for a while. She is very knowledgeable in nutrition. She talks a ton about eating high protein diets. And in this book, she goes into a little bit of the why, but also really sets you up for how to age well and explains like a lot of what I try to explain in my challenges and here on the podcast and things like that. of like nuanced concepts, like say everyone always says, okay, your metabolism slows down, right? After 30 or after whatever. But why? Okay. And I've talked about that on here before. So maybe you can already answer that. Like, oh, because you start losing muscle mass and that affects your metabolism, et cetera. But what can we do about it? How do we replace the muscle mass? All of that. And she gets a little bit more scientific. I was going to say sciencey that I usually do on the podcast, just because I try to break it down even further. But if you like that, and I don't think it's too much for those of us who don't like too much scientific explanation. I don't think it's too much personally. And for those who do enjoy it, it might just help give you even more insight. It's a great book. Can't recommend enough. I think I don't know if it's on Audible, but I know that there's a listing option as well. I just got it on my Kindle. So, number 2, and these are not in any kind of order. Number 2 is the book Teaching from Rest. This is aimed at homeschool moms, but I do think any mom could benefit from it. Really, really good. I love the author, Sarah Mackenzie. She also has a podcast called Read Aloud Revival. And that's definitely more of a homeschool kind of vibe. But the book is excellent. It's just really, I could have gone through, I was just messaging a friend about this week when I said, like, I could have highlighted every sentence, every word on every page. I was like, that's fantastic. She pulls great quotes out. I read it years ago, actually a couple of years ago. And then I reread it this summer to kind of gear up to start the homeschool year. And it was really, really helpful. It still is. Like her voice just pops in my head. Like hopefully maybe mine does sometimes for you of like, whoop, did you eat enough protein? Oh, veggies. Like I think when I'm starting to feel like, oh my gosh, I've accomplished nothing today. Like all we've done is this one math lesson or this, that. I'm like, nope, I am doing exactly what I'm supposed to be. I am present in what I'm doing. It's really great. Okay. Number 3 is The Power of One More. I believe I've talked about this one, but I'm pretty confident I only read it over the past year too. So I don't know if I have on the podcast. This is by Ed Mylett, and he has a podcast as well. I guess the first 3 people, all of podcasts. But this is a great book. I really had to try to narrow down. If I was only going to pick a couple kind of quote unquote personal development, I'd say all these are personal development because you're growing as a person with them. But I've mentioned a lot of other ones like Atomic Habits, like The Power of Habit, like What Most Successful People Do in the Morning, all those kinds of books. What's that other one I love? 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. We all know and love that one probably. But books like that, where this book was interesting because I think it wrapped up a lot of these concepts in one book. So The Power of One More, again, is what it's called. What I really liked about it is that it talked about how we need to kind of change our identity around things in order to make lasting change. It does talk about habits. It does talk about healthy tendencies, all these things. But it also goes into how much you need to like actually change how you think and feel about yourself. And it's not woo woo. I'm not woo woo. But for example, I think a concept in there was about like the thermostat of the room. Like if you think that you're set at 68, like you're going to hang out with people who are set at 68, you're going to live up to being 68 degrees. Like that's just what you know yourself as. So as soon as you raise the thermostat to like 70, 72, you're going to want to fight to get back to that 68, or you still live like you're at the 68 because that's all you've known. So you have to actually think about the way that you have changed and what your new identity is. And I think it's really helpful. He makes a lot of analogies to health and fitness. So you don't even have to make that stretch for yourself. But I see this a lot where it's like, no, a lot of clients I've worked with are just stuck in the idea that they are just not a fit person, or they're just not an active person, or they're just not a healthy person. And they are doing healthy habits and they are even improving and seeing physical and mental benefits. But in their head, they are still stuck as that's not me. I'm this person. So I thought it was a really helpful book in that regard. Okay. Number 4, I think I put on the book list last year. I pulled all of you for a book list for 2023 and I added a couple. It's called The World's Fittest Book. And my friend and Chasing Greatness group member suggested it to me. And I read it when I was pregnant with my 3rd. And it is what got me inspired to get my butt in gear and try to do something hard after having him. And that's when I decided to do the 50-mile race and stuff. But I think there's probably some caveats I have to say in there. I'm sure there's some language things or sexual things or something, like a couple possibly, because he just writes it as like a biography, autobiography, whatever. I don't agree with, I don't really know anything about the man's personal life, but it's an inspiring book when you're looking at physical feats and things like that. The author's Ross Edgley. And again, that's the world's fittest book. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4 more. So we are halfway. The next two, same author, and shocker, they have a podcast. I don't know if Ross Edgley does. He might, or at least he's probably been on People's, if not. But I tried to pare down and just pick one of these books by this author, but they're both great. I want to share both. I might have talked about the first one before. The Mission of Motherhood and The Life-Giving Table. Both are by Sally Clarkson. I love Sally Clarkson. A lot of you listening probably really familiar with her and are raising your hands and nodding like, yes, Sally. Because I don't remember how I was like, how she came into my sphere, how I was introduced to her. I think I was reading a blog or something random. And I heard about the book, The Mission of Motherhood, the first one. So my first, I think, introduction, anything into her, I think was this book. It's really great. She's very scriptural based. She's not Catholic, I don't think. Very, very solid Christian. So again, you're gonna get more of a scripture based than like church or saints or anything like that. But she also, like I said, has a podcast. And I actually have a lot of different books of hers. And again, a lot of you probably do and are listening to this. So I didn't know she was such a thing until then. Once I read the first book, I started hearing her interviewed on other people's podcasts and other people that I look up to and listen to or follow in the homeschool space, especially, are like, oh yeah, Sally, like she's the GOAT apparently. And I had no idea. So for good reason, I love her books. So The Mission of Motherhood's excellent. And then The Life-Giving Table, I'm actually not finished with, but I'm like 80% through on my Kindle. And so Mission of Motherhood in general is like just very, what I liked about it the most was the idea of using biblical principles and discipline. And that's been something we've done a lot in our house, which I think works really well with younger kids too, because instead of like, no, don't do that to your brother, it's okay, treat others as you want to be treated, and using scripture to correct. And it's been really awesome. Honestly, the kids can finish. My 2-year-old could finish the sentence when I'm like, nope, we don't do that because mom just told you not to. And God says, obey he's like parents and things like that. So, and again, the treat others, you want to be treated, that all came up really, they all started doing it really early. So that book was great. And then Life-Giving Table is all about like hospitality, nurturing your family through, it's not at all like a cooking book or make this for this holiday or this or that. It's more, again, concepts, but there are tangible tips and things like that too. And she's been through a lot of seasons of life, lived in like small apartments, big houses, those kinds of things. So it's really, I don't know, motivating to me, a good reality check for me. I like her tone. I like her attitude in the books of like very realistic though. But okay, some days you also just throw out a snack plate and call it dinner, but it's all about the way you're doing it and the posture behind it and all of that, like people first. So I really, really like that book. Again, I need to still finish it, but it's great so far. And then last two, these ones are actually a little bit more quote unquote business, but I think you guys would like them even if you don't necessarily have a business or anything like that, or care much about business books. The first is The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. And I believe I've talked about this. This one is one of those very simple concept books that I just read at the right time, I think. So it may or may not do it for you, but it's essentially the idea of day after day, we're either getting closer to our goals or we're falling farther away from them, or we're either getting healthier day by day or getting more unhealthy day by day. But it goes more into, it's more nuanced than that. I really liked it. Again, talks about business a little bit of like each day you're either going to become more successful business or less successful, but I think everyone can benefit from it. And the last one, this is just a fun one. I don't think I've ever talked about on here. Maybe I have, but it's called Never Split the Difference. And again, some of you might be like, if and when you're reading it, might think like, this is so random. Why did Brittany suggest this one, and some of you might really enjoy it. It is, so I'll give you kind of the gist of it. Was a man who was like a hostage negotiator. I want to say for the FBI, but I haven't read it in a couple of years. I think I read it 2 or 3 years ago. But he was definitely a hostage negotiator. Again, I think FBI, I don't know what. It was very high up. Like he was a big deal hostage negotiator. And he's giving negotiation tips. Now, it could be just looked at as a business book, but honestly, I have not used any of it in business, but I have in real life, like little funny tips, such as people always want to say no. So if you call somebody and instead of saying, hey, is this a good time? The human nature, the human inclination, they're going to want to say no. So instead, when you call someone, you just say, hey, is this a bad time? And they'll be like, oh, well, no, because you want to say no first. And that even just that little tip, like, wow, that's really revolutionized my getting things done and calling people. It's very interesting. I'm a terrible negotiator. I hate calling about a phone bill or this or that. And it has helped me grow a little bit in this area, get some skills. So truly, I don't use it at all. I'm being completely honest with you. I don't negotiate with anybody, no, a challenge or clients or anything. It's purely for just like personal life. And it was really entertaining to read because each chapter starts with a story of when he was doing his hostage negotiations and then goes into the tip. So entertaining if you like that kind of thing. All right. I will try to think. I know there are some biographies that were inspiring and funny and whatever to me. So I'll try to think on that. But otherwise, I hope this gives you a little bit. I like to always have a running notes list on my phone so that I can never have to be like, oh, what am I going to read next? Just look and see. So like I said, I left fiction off because I do think fiction is really personal as well. But I would love your feedback. I would love to hear, even selfishly, just for myself, your top reads, maybe from last year, maybe ever. And, we could share out some other ideas, maybe the next couple. I'm going to be pre-recording a little bit, but that some episodes down the road, then even once we get into like April-ish, second quarter of the year, if we all start running out of book ideas, you have book ideas you'd love to share, please email me, Brittany@healthycatholicmoms.com. All right. Thank you so much for tuning in today. And next episode, we are going to talk about 5 ways to care for yourself as a busy mom. And they're going to be helpful. You know me, it's not going to be frou-frou. Like, go take a second in the closet and inhale some chocolate and whatever. But truly ways that you can make sure that you are running on and firing on all cylinders. All right. I will talk to you then. Have a great rest of your day.